welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be taking a look at this album here. It's by 10cc and it is their album Look Here. So yes, I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. Now, after completing the last album, which was called Bloody Tourists, Eric Stewart, who was in the band, suffered a car accident in the year 1979. He was left blind in one eye and suffered minor hearing loss. So he had to take some time off to kind of recover from that. While Graham Gouldman was going through a bit of a divorce. He had some personal problems around this time, and those experiences would creep into a couple of his songs on the album. In the interim though, they did release the Greatest Hits album, their first Greatest Hits album here, which in many ways kind of closed off those kind of glory years of 10cc, kind of the first sort of two chapters off their careers, because after this, which I must say I think is one of the Greatest Hits albums. There's seriously not a bad song on here. It's just hit after hit. After this album, they didn't have any other sort of really big charting commercial singles. But anyway, back to this one here, and they recorded this at the southern branch of their Strawberry recording studios, and upon its release, the critical reception was quite lukewarm. It didn't get a lot of great reviews, and commercially it was a disappointment compared to their previous albums. It reached 35 here in the UK and 180 over in America, but notably it did reach number 3 in Norway, which was it was quite a successful album there. But those kind of chart positions really reflect the kind of changing musical tastes, what were going on, and just kind of how willing people were to kind of completely move on from the 70s. This was the start of a new decade, and 10cc were really out of fashion by this point. So we'll just show you the final copy of it here. So firstly, the cover. It's a very strange cover because the album isn't called Are You Normal? It's a common misconception that it's called that. But yeah, it's just not a great cover, I don't think. Back of it, it just says the group, and you've got the band there. So it's the same lineup who played on Bloody Tourists, I believe, are on here. And inside we've got not only the inner sleeve, which has all of the lyrics to it, and then the record itself, which is on Mercury, but on a kind of nice sort of custom labels. First side says, "Are you ready?" And the final side says, the second side there says, "Are you done?" So it's kind of a funky kind of design, sort of concept here. I mean, not my favourite, but yeah, it's kind of carried all the way through the album. And then you also get a poster with it as well, which is this image of a kind of sheep on a kind of lounging sort of sofa thing, which this was used as the American album cover, a full shot of this, just 10cc look here, at the top. Personally, I think that makes a much better cover. I think it's certainly a lot more in tune with some of their previous covers. And yeah, I just think it's a better image than this, to be fair. Which is there very tiny, but yeah, this just seems it was kind of just slapped together without much thought. Okay, so I'll now go over each of the album songs in detail. So I will score each track out of 10, and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album.
125.
Okay, so it kicks off with a song called 125, which the title of this track refers to the tempo of kind of disco records, and it's kind of a kind of comment on kind of modern sort of musical tastes off the time. The song is semi-interesting. It goes through a few different stages, from a kind of slodgy opening verse at kind of 125. It's just a bit slodgy, a little bit stale, but then you do get some decent guitar solos on it, and they do sound very good, sound very crisp, nicely produced. And then a kind of more kind of conversational middle part when Eric Stewart takes the lead, and that sounds really good. But then it's kind of let down by this very pointless kind of reggae interlude. It just seems very out of place, kind of just like sort of slapped on, and yeah, very confused, that kind of song. And it feels like it goes on forever, like as well. Like even though it is, I think, like less than 5 minutes long, it just kind of feels like it kind of is going on and on and on. And like notably, this was the lead single from the album, and it was a complete flop here in the UK. Failed to chart. It was a massive kind of like fall from grace, really. I mean, considering like the album before, like the lead single Dreadlock Holiday got to #1 here, and this song failing to chart, yeah, just an absolute failure. But like I said earlier, like about the album, it did reach #9 in Norway, this song. So yeah, like they seem to like it like over there. But anyway, 125 for me, we get a 7 out of 10. It's not awful. It's just an okay song.
They'll never listen to you.
Next track up is called Welcome to the World, which is possibly my favourite on the album, and it's also very notable as well because it was, I think it's the first and maybe even the only 10cc song not written by any of the founding members. So that kind of tells you something, kind of like the best song here like wasn't written by either Stuart or Gouldman. But yeah, it's kind of got a kind of funky and kind of synth-based musical backing, but lyrically it's a bit more kind of political, a little bit more topical, this song, about kind of world overpopulation, and like it references like one of like their own songs, like it says like 1,000 congressmen assemble every day, they'll send us packing on a dreadlock holiday. But yeah, it is a good song. It's got some great funky bass playing like from Gouldman in it, and it is just one of the more interesting tracks, like for me, like on the album. It's one of the ones which reminds me most of kind of like How Dare You era, like 10cc, like kind of like that, kind of like the peak, like off like their powers there. So yeah, for me, Welcome to the World, a pretty good song there, and we'll get an 8 out of 10.
Thought I'd better have me a vacation. Got my ticket.
Next track up is called How Am I Ever Gonna Say Goodbye, which is a song I believe written wholly by Graham Gouldman, and it's kind of slower track with kind of these prominent backing vocals on it and some quite nice instrumentation on it too. Lyrically, it's about a guy kind of mulling over how he's going to sort of like break up like with his girlfriend. He sings on it like, I've been thinking writing you a letter, maybe a telegram would be better. I'll be worried how it's going to get there, so I'll change my mind. But yeah, it's a good song. It's got a kind of catchy melody on it. It is one of the more sort of earwormy songs like on the album. Like even if it does kind of slightly recycle the kind of reggae vibe like off Dreadlock Holiday, it's still a good song though, and for me we'll get a 7 out of 10.
Don't say we beg, have mercy upon us. We know you don't want.
Next up is called Don't Send Me Back, which is possibly the worst song on the album. It's the first real like problematic song we have, and it's kind of got this kind of fast-paced kind of flamenco style on it. It was notably, this one was written and sung by the guitarist Rick Fenn, and I mean there is some good guitar work on it, but for me the song is just very annoying, and it's quite offensive as well, like I would say, like by today's standards. Lyrically, it is about the kind of plight like of like refugees, but it's kind of more sort of set like as a sort of like joyous kind of travelogue and kind of thing, and they kind of like the way like they kind of sing like the chorus. It's almost like they're kind of like making fun like of like these people, which certainly like wouldn't he fly today. Plus, Rick Fenn's not much like of a singer, so I do write this song off as pure filler. Certainly for me, one of the worst songs in the 10cc back catalogue there. So that one would get a 3 out of 10 from me.
Isn't it funny how it started?
Okay, next track up is called I Took You Home, which closes off the first side, and this is a kind of Eric Stewart kind of song ballad. It's got some nice guitar parts on it again, but it does have some quite bland lyrics on it though. I mean, some of the blandest lyrics, like for like a band who are usually famed for their kind of witty wordplay and kind of like their cleverness, this song is just so bland. He sings on it, I took you home, you took me in, I knew I'd never be the same again. Baby, isn't it funny how it started? Well, you know. And that's literally the chorus. It just says absolutely nothing in it. Musically, it is okay. It's got some half-decent production on it, though. Like some, like, quite interesting choices. It's kind of got, like, these kind of prominent kind of synth like backing, which does give the song like some drama, like to like the arrangement at least. But the actual song itself is just so bland. 10cc have done so many better ballads, and yeah, for me, it's just a very average song there.
It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter.
Talking of like better ballads, we do get one of them now opening the second side called "It Doesn't Matter at All," which isn't, again, I'm not gonna say this is one of 10cc's best songs, but certainly on this album it is one of the better tracks, and I think it builds up really well. I like, again, there's a structure to this song, it kind of makes sense. The chorus is really good. It's got a kind of like flowing melody. He kind of sings with it. People say that I'm crazy. People call me a fool. They've got no business to talk. No reason at all. Eric sings it really well, and this was another single taken from the album, but again, it fared very poorly. Failed to chart pretty much everywhere like it was issued. But I do think it is one of the better tracks, and like it was also, I believe, the only track from this album put on a recent 10cc compilation, like I forget like what like it's called, like, but like yeah, like it's like one of like the more like sort of like like widely accepted like sort of like better songs like on the album. So yeah, it doesn't matter at all, and we'll get an 8 out of 10 from me.
Drinking all that funky stuff.
The next track up is called Dressed to Kill, which is another track which tries to be very funky, very current. It's got a kind of low-key reggae vibe on it as well, but for me it just very much misses the mark. It's kind of like lyrically about kind of someone kind of getting ready for a night out and trying to sort of convince themselves that like they look good and that, but some of the lyrics are just utter trite like on here. Like the chorus, it says drinking all that funky stuff, drink it in till you get enough. It's absolutely meaningless. It's a track like where like you do like a positive though, you do really notice the two drummers they had, like Stuart Tosh and Paul Burgess. They play in unison, and that does give the track like some muscle. Plus there's some equally decent guitar playing like on it, but it is just such an uninspired composition that again I really struggle to rate this one any higher than a 4 out of 10. Next track up is called Lovers Anonymous, which is kind of about a kind of dating helpline or something like that sort, but it is a subject which 10cc have covered before on the song Marriage Bureau Rendezvous from Deceptive Bends, so it's kind of nothing, it's not new territory for them really. I mean, I do quite like the verse and like the main guitar riff like off like the track, but for me, kind of like by the time you get to the chorus, it's got this kind of lower vocal going on, like kind of like Eric singing the leads, and like then like we get like these like little like interjections like from Gilmour. Just sounds very cheesy, very kind of like contrived. I mean, you have got a kind of semi-interesting middle section which kind of gives the song a slightly Godly and Creme sort of flavour to it. It almost saves the song for me, like actually, it has kind of proggier feel, like sort of like reprises, like some of like the earlier albums, things like the original soundtrack. So like it's definitely a track which does have a kind of 10cc-ness to it, but it's still overall like a really average song for me. So for me, yeah, would only still get a 6 out of 10.
Down to the bone, I hate to eat alone.
Next track up is another one of Graham Gouldman's breakup songs on this album. It's called I Hate to Eat Alone, which is a kind of like an acoustic bass ballad about kind of like a narrator getting kind of fed up, like in like his own small world, and kind of like feeling that he has like no one to share it with. I mean, Gouldman sings it quite well, and it kind of reflects like the feelings of kind of heartbreak and sort of isolation quite well. Plus you have got some kind of, again, slightly interesting production choices, a kind of like a vocoder effects going on. Reminds me a bit of like ELO sort of vibe to it. But for me, again, just kind of compositionally, it's not a song which really stands out. It's lacking in melody as well. It's just not a particularly memorable song. So yeah, for me, that one would also get a 6 out of 10. Next track up, we do pick up the pace a bit. It's called Strange Lover, which is a very generic rock track, this. Lyrically, it is about, well, a strange lover, like they sort of mentioned, like only like appearing like at night, and it's kind of cliches like that. because it is, yeah, it's just a forgettable song. This, it can't even be saved by like a kind of eerie, like kind of like a middle eight. You've got these kind of keyboard textures going on, plus you've got the kind of quite a kind of scary kind of ending to it as well, like when Eric's vocal kind of just sort of speeds up like to like infinity, and yeah, it just sounds a bit kind of confused like again. So yeah, Strange Lover for me would get a 5 out of 10.
It is mine to hide its frown. It is wrong.
And then the album ends with another kind of like dour note called LA Inflatable, which is a song, like again, like quite an interesting lyric to this one. It's about kind of people having plastic surgery and how it's kind of become such like an obsession like that. Like everyone like kind of ends up like looking the same, and says like one line says about like curves that shouldn't be there and kind of stuff like that. So kind of lyrically is quite interesting, quite kind of dystopian, that sort of thing almost. But it's teamed with the most generic rock and roll arrangement. This kind of 12-bar blues kind of thing. It's just it can't even make like this lyric this quite interesting lyrical concept like seem like interesting. It just sort of like makes it just makes the song so forgettable for me. I think it might have worked like with a kind of more stripped back arrangement sort of thing, like kind of like a more kind of stripped back production, like with kind of less going on, like kind of really just like a kind of guitar and sort of drums and stuff like that. But instead they kind of put all manner of keyboards on it, all manner of synthesizers, just very overproduced this song for me. And then it kind of ends with kind of each of the band members kind of like doing like a little solo. You get a little keyboard solo, a little guitar solo. Again, it just sort of fades out, and it just doesn't leave much of an impression on me. So yeah, and that one would also get a 4 out of 10 there for LA Inflatable. Okay, so overall this album would score 58%, so that's not a great score for me. Like usually, like my sort of like album reviews tend to average in sort of like the 70s or 80%, like if I tend to like the album. So in this case, I would say this is a poor record, certainly by 10cc standards. Like it's, I was going to say it's kind of 10cc by numbers, but it's really kind of like the second phase of 10cc, the kind of Godly and Kremlos 10cc, like as it were, because it's very much missing the kind of quirkiness like what they brought to the band. And like Stewart and Gilmour, although the first 2 albums they made, like kind of like just like the 2 of them like worked like quite well, by this point I think they just like ran out of steam, and I just feel like they couldn't produce a kind of consistent material across a whole album which would like create albums like which rivaled the stuff like which like they worked on like as like the like original 4-piece. Instead it was kind of like half a band like sort of making this album. And yes, I will take into account, I mean, like it was made in like quite unfortunate circumstances, like with like Eric's car crash and like Graham's divorce and that, like, but there were signs certainly before this like that 10cc were slowly starting to run out of steam. I mean, certainly like about like a good like chunk of like Bloody Tourists like just doesn't really speak to me, and they were becoming less and less relevant. And about 2 or 3 years after this album came out, they would call it a day. So very much this was kind of like a kind of nail like in like the coffin like for like them, really. Like it was like there was no going back to like kind of like the commercial height like of like the mid-70s for them. So anyway, yes, I hope you have enjoyed my review of this. I would be interested to know what you think of the album down below, like if there's any people out there who absolutely love it and think that I'm just talking a load of rubbish about it. I'd be interested like to hear like from like yous. I hope you have enjoyed the review, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.